March 1974. A search party cuts through dense Philippine jungle, calling out in Japanese. They're looking for ghosts, soldiers who refuse to believe World War II ended 29 years ago. Suddenly, a figure emerges from the shadows. Weathered, armed, and wearing a tattered uniform, he's ready to fight. His name is Hiroo Onoda, and in his mind, the war never ended. But here's what makes this story truly chilling. Onoda wasn't captured. He wasn't rescued. He was still on a mission. To understand how a man could fight a war for 3 decades alone, we need to go back to 1944. Hiroo Onoda was 22 years old, an intelligence officer trained by the Japanese Imperial Army's elite Nakano School. Think of it as Japan's version of special operations training. But this wasn't just military training. Onoda and his fellow officers were being prepared for something darker. They learned guerrilla warfare, survival tactics, and perhaps most importantly, they were indoctrinated with a code: never surrender. Death before dishonesty. The Emperor's word was absolute. He was being sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines with a crystal-clear mission: conduct guerrilla warfare, gather intelligence, and under no circumstances surrender. When American forces invaded Lubang in February 1945, his commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, gave him his final orders as he prepared to evacuate. It may take 3 years. Little did Onoda know that within months the war would be over. But his war was just beginning, and it would claim lives even decades after the peace treaties were signed. 8 August 1945, Japan surrendered. The Emperor himself broadcast the surrender to the nation. But on Lubang Island, Onoda and 3 other soldiers heard something very different. They found leaflets dropped from American planes announcing Japan's defeat. Their reaction? It must be propaganda. Allied psychological warfare. Think about their logic for a moment. These men had been trained to expect deception. They'd been told the enemy would use every trick possible to get them to surrender. So when leaflets fell from the sky saying Japan had lost, saying the Emperor had surrendered, the very thing they were trained to never do, it confirmed their suspicions. This was exactly what the enemy would say. Over the following years, the Philippine government and Japanese officials made numerous attempts to reach them. They dropped more leaflets, they sent search parties, they even had family members broadcast messages over loudspeakers. But Onoda had an answer for everything. The voices were actors, the leaflets were fake, the photographs of Japan's reconstruction were doctored. These weren't just 4 men hiding in the jungle. They were conducting military operations, raiding villages for supplies, burning crops, and engaging in firefights with local police and armed forces. One by one, Onoda's companions fell. In 1949, one soldier surrendered, convinced at last that the war was over. In 1954, another was killed in a firefight with a search party. Then, in 1972, Shimada was killed by Philippine police. After 27 years in the jungle, Hiroo Onoda was alone, completely alone, still fighting, still conducting guerrilla operations, still waiting for orders. Every sound in the jungle could be the rescue party, the isolation, the absolute conviction required to continue, the mental fortress he must have built around himself to keep functioning. But here's what's remarkable. Onoda's survival skills were impeccable. He maintained his rifle in working condition for 3 decades. He made his own bullets. He repaired his uniform with fibers and tree bark. He lived off the land, moving constantly, staying sharp. He was the ghost of Lubang Island, feared, hunted, but never caught. Then, in February 1974, something impossible happened. A Japanese college dropout named Norio Suzuki decided to go searching for 3 things: a panda, the abominable snowman, and Lieutenant Onoda. He found him. Suzuki tracked Onoda through the jungle and, incredibly, approached him peacefully. For the first time in decades, Onoda spoke with someone from the outside world. But even then, even after 29 years, Onoda refused to stand down. His orders were clear. He would only surrender when his commanding officer relieved him of duty. He went back to Japan and found Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, now a bookseller, living a quiet civilian life. The Japanese government authorized Taniguchi to travel to Lubang Island. On March 9, 1974, Major Taniguchi walked into the jungle in full uniform and found his former subordinate. He read the official orders. "You are relieved of duty. The war is over." Only then did Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda surrender his sword, his rifle, still in working order, his ammunition, and several hand grenades. 28 years, 6 months, and 8 days after World War II ended, 10,416 days, Onoda's war finally came to an end. The Philippine government, recognizing the extraordinary circumstances, pardoned Onoda for the deaths that occurred during his long holdout. When Onoda returned to Japan, he was both a hero and an anachronism. He'd left behind a militaristic empire and returned to an economic powerhouse. The Japan he remembered no longer existed. In many ways, he'd become a man without a time. He struggled with modern life. Eventually, he moved to Brazil, became a cattle rancher, and later returned to Japan to run nature schools for children, teaching survival and self-reliance, the very skills that kept him alive for so long. Hiroo Onoda died in 2014 at age 91. To his last days, he never expressed regret for following his orders. From his perspective, he'd done exactly what was asked of him. He'd been a perfect soldier. But his story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Where is the line between loyalty and delusion, between duty and tragedy? What happens when orders become identity itself? Onoda's story isn't just about a soldier who wouldn't surrender. It's about the terrifying power of belief, the weight of duty, and the devastating human cost when we can't or won't accept that the war is over. Sometimes the hardest battle isn't learning how to fight. It's learning how to stop.